Okay, imagine this. You're 16 years old. You get kidnapped from your home, forced into slavery in a totally foreign country, and then, years later, you actually choose to go back to help the very people who captured you. That's the real story of St. Patrick. And trust me, it's a lot more intense than shamrocks and parades. And no, this isn't just some old legend. This is the story of a real person, a teenager who went through something unimaginable and made a choice that literally changed history. So let's set the scene. Our story doesn't even start in Ireland. It starts back in Roman Britain, late in the 4th century. And Patrick wasn't some poor kid. His family was actually pretty important. His dad was a deacon in the church and a local official. So yeah, he had a pretty comfortable life. But that comfortable life just vanished. When he was 16, Irish raiders attacked his home, kidnapped him, and dragged him off to Ireland to be sold as a slave. For the next 6 years, his life was brutal and lonely, working as a shepherd out in the cold Irish hills. But it was out there, all alone, that something inside him began to change. He started praying constantly, and his faith grew incredibly strong. And, this is super important, he learned the Irish language and their customs. He had no way of knowing it then, but this was basically the perfect training for what was coming next. After 6 long years, he had a dream where a voice told him a ship was waiting for him. So he made this daring escape, traveling over 200 miles to the coast, and somehow he actually made it back home to his family. I mean, can you imagine their relief? They begged him never, ever to leave them again. But he couldn't just go back to his old life. He started having these really intense dreams. In one vision, a man from Ireland gave him a letter, and as he read it, he heard the voices of the Irish people calling out to him, begging him to come back and walk among them again. And this is where the story takes a truly unbelievable turn. He made this huge, life-changing decision. He was going to go back to the place that was the source of all his pain, not for revenge, but to help the very people who had enslaved him. But he didn't just rush back in. He knew this was a massive challenge, and he needed to be ready. So he spent more than 15 years studying in a place called Gaul, which we now call France, training to become a priest and then a bishop. So, around the year 432, Patrick finally went back to Ireland. Now, you have to understand, this wasn't one unified country. It was more like a patchwork of different territories, each ruled by its own king or chieftain with their own loyal warriors. It was a really dangerous and unpredictable place to be. And he wasn't just bringing in a few new ideas, he was challenging the entire power structure. See, the most influential people in that society were the Druids. And they weren't just priests. They were the judges, the advisors, the doctors. They held all the power. Just how dangerous was his mission? Well, he later wrote that he was captured and thrown in chains at least 12 different times. Just think about that. A dozen times he was made a prisoner all over again. I mean, he lived every day with the threat of being robbed, attacked, maybe even killed. He often had to pay local kings just for safe passage through their lands. But for him, none of that was a reason to stop. Now, Patrick was definitely brave, but he was also incredibly smart. He knew he couldn't just walk into a village, a foreigner and a former slave, and expect anyone to listen to him. He had a strategy. He started at the top. He'd go straight to the local king or chieftain, show his respect, and offer them gifts. He understood a simple truth. If you can get the leader on your side, everyone else is way more likely to hear you out. But there was another challenge. How do you explain these huge, complex spiritual ideas to people who have never heard them before, especially when most of them can't even read or write? Okay, take the concept of the Trinity, for example. The idea that God is 3 different persons, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, but is also one single God. I mean, that's a tough concept to wrap your head around, even today. So what did Patrick do? Legend says he just looked down and used this simple 3-leaf shamrock that grew everywhere. One plant, but with 3 distinct leaves. It was genius. He used something people already knew and saw every day to explain something they'd never heard before. But Patrick's mission went way beyond just talking to people. He was building something that was meant to last, laying the foundation for a whole new kind of society in Ireland. He built hundreds of churches, sure, but more than that, he founded monasteries that became incredible centers of learning, teaching people how to read and write. He trained local Irish people to become priests and leaders themselves. And in a move that was way ahead of its time, he actively supported women who wanted to form their own religious communities as nuns. We actually know a lot of this from Patrick himself. Near the end of his life, he wrote a book called the Confessio. It's basically his autobiography. And in it, he makes it crystal clear that he never did any of this for money or for fame, but because he felt it was his duty to the Irish people. So, by the time he died on March 17th, 461, Ireland was on a completely new path. He had helped turn an island of separate, warring tribes into a unified Christian nation that became a powerhouse of learning. For centuries afterwards, Irish monks would travel all over Europe, preserving knowledge during the Dark Ages. So the real story of St. Patrick, it has nothing to do with green rivers or parades. It's a story about incredible resilience and the unbelievable power of forgiveness. And it leaves us with one heck of a question. What gives someone the strength to not just forgive their enemies, but to dedicate their entire life to serving them?